You're looking for a synth that won't sit on a shelf collecting dust, something that feels solid enough to survive daily studio life, easy enough to patch into your existing setup, and worth every penny you spend. That hesitation you feel before hitting buy is exactly what I felt when I started hunting for a desktop polyphonic synth that could actually replace a rack without stealing all my desk space. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's walk through why the Novation Peak might be the answer to that dilemma, and where it could end up being more trouble than it's worth. First off, the Peak is positioned as a desktop-friendly, 8-voice machine that tries to give you the depth of a modular system without the endless cables. The biggest draw for most buyers is the new Oxford oscillators, which promise richer harmonic content than the average digital synth. In practice, that means you can dial in thick, evolving pads for ambient tracks or punchy leads for techno without resorting to a separate distortion unit. I've spent a few weeks testing it alongside a classic analog monosynth and a software modular patch. When I program a slowly moving drone, the Peak's oscillators stay in tune and the built-in distortion adds just enough grit to make the sound feel alive, something that a pure digital engine often lacks. If you're a home producer who works in a small room, the compact design is a genuine advantage. The unit sits comfortably next to a laptop and a MIDI controller, and the optional die-cast aluminum stand gives it a bit more heft, preventing it from sliding when you're tweaking knobs. The front panel layout is logical. You have dedicated controls for waveform selection, a distortion knob, and a set of filter parameters that are easy to reach. The modulation matrix, while extensive on paper, actually feels approachable because you can route LFOs, envelopes, and even the internal sequencer to almost any destination with a single turn of a knob. That kind of hand-syn modulation is what makes the Peak useful for live performance as well as studio composition. Now, who should really consider adding the Peak to their rig? If you already own a DAW and a basic MIDI keyboard, and you're looking to expand your sound palette beyond the stock software instruments, the Peak gives you a hardware voice that you can tweak in real time. It's particularly handy for producers who like to blend digital precision with analog-style warmth. Think electronic musicians who want that gritty edge without buying a separate distortion pedal. The built-in effects, like reverb and delay, are also usable straight out of the box, so you don't need to route audio through a separate rack for basic processing. For anyone who enjoys modular experimentation, the Play Peak with modular systems claim isn't just marketing fluff. The CV inputs and outputs let you sync the synth to Eurorack gear or a modular case, opening up a world of patching possibilities that many desktop synths ignore. On the flip side, there are clear reasons to skip the Peak. If you're a purist analog enthusiast who insists on hand-wired signal paths and voltage-controlled oscillators, the Peak's digital core might feel too cooked. Likewise, if you primarily produce acoustic-oriented music and rarely need complex modulation or heavy distortion, you may never tap into the features that justify its price tag. Another practical drawback is the learning curve around the modulation system. While it's more intuitive than a full modular board, there's still a fair amount of menu diving to set up deep routings, and the display isn't large enough to show every parameter at once. In a fast-paced live setting, that could lead to a few awkward moments if you haven't rehearsed your patches. One real-world scenario I tried was using the Peak as a layered sound source for a live DJ set. I programmed a 4-voice pad that slowly opened up a filter during a breakdown, then switched to a 2-voice lead that responded to the pitch bend on my controller. The transition was seamless because the synth can store multiple patches and recall them instantly. The only hiccup was that the preset navigation required a couple of button presses, which felt a touch clunky when I was juggling other gear. If you need instant one-button changes, you might want to consider a synth with dedicated scene buttons or integrate the Peak into a MIDI controller that can send program change messages. Another use case is studio production for film scores. The rich harmonic content of the Oxford oscillators, combined with the distortion and filter options, lets you craft evolving textures that sit well under dialogue. I layered a subtle, low-frequency drone from the Peak beneath a piano track, and the added warmth gave the mix a more cinematic feel without any additional plugins. Because the synth runs on a standard 12V power supply and doesn't require a computer to produce sound, it's a reliable piece of hardware that can sit on a rack for long sessions without overheating, something that's often a hidden trade-off with smaller desktop units. In terms of value, the Peak sits at a price point